What's up, my friends, and welcome back to another edition of the Running Back Podcast. Thanks so much for hanging out with us wherever you find us, whether you're listening on the audio-only platforms or you're watching us here on YouTube. Thank you so much for being a part of today's episode. Tyler Zulli and Frank Close back with you for another week of Phillies baseball conversation. And it has been nothing short of brilliance from Cristopher Sanchez, which is what we are going to get into in just a moment. But another successful series for the Phillies as they have really owned the San Diego Padres this season, and for the better part of the last few years now. It's funny because the Padres, I think have struggled, no doubt. We'll talk more about their offense in a little bit, but on paper are a very good baseball club. And over really basically since the 2023 NLCS, the Phillies have done a really nice job with the Padres in both the regular season and the postseason.
Yeah, kind of inexplicable because on paper they don't necessarily match up well. A lot of their tough righties seem to be, well, they're not doing well this year. That's for sure. But you kind of expect them to make it a challenge for the Phillies. Very good left-handed starters, but yeah, the Phillies just seem to have edged them out. I mean, of course, these were not dominant wins in terms of offense, but yeah, this is something you want to see from this team. They got to start beating the better teams, and this was, I thought that they beat a team that's a good team 4 times out of 5. We're going to see Game 6 coming up this afternoon, but I think they're actually showing that they can stick with some of the bigger teams. Although again, the Padres are flawed, but I think we could say that about a lot of the quote unquote good teams right now.
Sure, and I don't know if you consider the Phillies at this moment a good team or not. 3 games over 500. For really the first time all year. And one of the things that we'll talk about later is run differential amongst some of the good teams. Because I was going to go and kind of rip the Phillies for their negative run differential. And then I went and pulled some run differentials from some teams that are sitting around their mark, some of the better teams in baseball. And I'll give you some of those numbers. I think it might be a little bit surprising, some of these teams' run differentials. Now, there's a key difference between the Phillies and most of these other teams, which is to the Phillies' fault. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit, because I think the best place to start today, of course, is the end of Cristopher Sanchez's dominant scoreless streak. He gave up a run last night for the first time in 50 2/3 innings. It marks the 3rd best scoreless streak in the history of the live ball era, which dates back to 1920. It is the 5th best all time and is the best scoreless streak in the history of baseball by a left-handed pitcher. Don Mattingly said yesterday, he said he doesn't think his vocabulary is strong enough to describe how good Cristopher Sanchez has been. Brilliant, dominant, exceptional. You could use any one of those and more. This has been one of the most impressive streaks I have ever seen. And now he etched himself in the top 5 in not just the live ball era, but we're talking about adding Walter Johnson to the mix. We're talking about going back to 1912 to get some of these stats. An unbelievable performance from Cristopher Sanchez.
Yeah, I'm just in awe that the Phillies were able to get this guy. I encourage you to check out the Phillies show with Jim Salisbury, Todd Zalecki, and Ruben Amaro Jr. because they had Matt Klentak on this week, and he talked about how the Phillies went about acquiring Cristopher Sanchez, and it's just so funny because as Curtis Mead was tearing the cover off the ball in the minor leagues, it seemed like the Phillies were going to lose this trade big time as Cristopher Sanchez just was all over the place. But man, credit to the Phillies scouts to really kind of have a beat on Cristopher Sanchez and that interest, and 2, to develop him along. I mean, I think you can't say enough for the Phillies staff for that, because you know what, when he was pitching around 2020, even going into 2023. You kind of thought like, he's just a guy, sure. You didn't really think of him as somebody that was going to be a rotation mainstay. And boy, did he turn that around.
Well, and, I'm not going to pretend like I know every pitching coach in baseball, because that would be a lie. But I do look around baseball and I say, there's a very real chance that 2 of maybe the 3 or 4 best pitching coaches in baseball reside in the National League East. Because Caleb Cotham deserves his flowers for what he has done for this pitching staff. And then you look at Atlanta and, you realize how good Jeremy Hefner has been in his career. He was great with the Mets. He's been great this year with the Braves. And it's no surprise that these 2 teams, now they have collected good players, and that's step number 1 to having good pitching staffs. But it's no surprise that these two teams have, two of the best pitching staffs in baseball this year. When you look at who their pitching coaches are, and it's a testament to their pitching development, their organizational development. It's a testament to how these guys work on a daily basis. It's a testament to the pitching coach relationship. And as much as I have given JT Realmuto flack for his, lack of offensive performance this year, there is a reality that says you look at the pitching staff's numbers when JT is behind the plate, they're exceptional.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. And I think, too, it was a strategy of the Phillies for a while to try to take a chance on some of these, perhaps, dare I say it, fringe major leaguers. And maybe Cristopher Sanchez might have been considered that at one point in his career, and really shaping them into something. I mean, they netted them Jose Alvarado, who I know has been up and down the last couple of years, but he was another project that they made into something. So they've really tried to find the raw talent and bring it along, and I think they've done so very nicely.
And I think that can extend to guys that have already been in the majors as well and have elevated themselves. I think about Matt Strahm. Matt Strahm was a fine major leaguer. He had some good seasons. I think if you polled baseball fans and said who has Matt Strahm had the most success with in his career, the answer would be his time in Philadelphia. I mean, he came in and was kind of forced to be a starter out of necessity, moved back into the bullpen and shifted into a role that really worked for him. It's just another guy in that long list of names that you can continue to point to. I think Matt Strahm plays in that fold as well, but he was already an established major leaguer who became a much better pitcher in his time with the Phillies.
Yeah, and even Jesus Luzardo, who I thought the world of before he was a Philly, and he seemed to bring a little something extra last year too. So,
sure.
So yeah,
and that's a guy like stuff-wise has always been there, but he's really honed in on who he is and what he succeeds with. The runners in scoring position thing early in the season was there, and the tipping pitches last year was there. But if you went and looked at Jesus Luzardo's now 40 some odd starts as a member of the Phillies, I would say they're overwhelmingly good, with the exception of the two worst starts in the history I've ever seen. But they're overwhelmingly good other than that.
Yeah, I had those couple bad starts in a row last year, and then this year, of course, he had some of his lumps too. But yeah, overwhelmingly, when he's taken the ball, the Phillies have had a chance to win.
So the Cristopher Sanchez number that really stood out to me, not that he didn't break Oral Hershiser's record, he didn't get to Don Drysdale, but when people ask me, who do I think the best at their position is, or who's the best X of all time, there's an argument to be made about basically every conversation. But when somebody asks me who's the best pitcher of all time, in my opinion, my answer has always been Bob Gibson. For a very long time, my answer is Bob Gibson. And not only did Cristopher Sanchez pass Bob Gibson, the guy that I believe to be the best starting pitcher ever, but he passed Bob Gibson's streak in a season that is probably unquestionably the best starting pitching season of all time. Bob Gibson's 1968, he went 22-9 with a 1.12 ERA. He had an 11.2 WAR that season, 28 complete games, 13 shutouts. And in that run, posted his consecutive scoreless streak. Now, I'm not going to say that Cristopher Sanchez is going to have a 1968 Bob Gibson season, because that would be, you would go from remarkable to one of the greatest seasons of all time. But the comparison being Bob Gibson's best year ever, one of the best pitching seasons ever. Cristopher Sanchez's mark was better than Bob Gibson's mark. That's incredible company to be in.
I mean, Sanchez right now leading the league 4.7 WAR, and 3.3 of that came in the month of May, which is just
June.
That's just insane. And 1 month 3.3. I mean, you're talking all-star when you get to 6. Elite when you get to 8. Now last year he was 8.1.
Right.
He's going to beat that number. If I know he was my choice for Cy Young before the season began. I really think he's going to do it this time. I mean, he is locked in a way that I don't remember another pitcher having since maybe Roy Halladay's Cy Young season.
Yeah, and I mean there's some really good pitchers in the National League. I know we talked about this last week. Mizorowski was in any other month, in any other year, Mizorowski's the runaway National League Pitcher of the Month. Cristopher Sanchez gets named the National League Pitcher of the Month, and rightfully so, because he was that dominant. But Mizorowski's been awesome. Chase Burns from the Cincinnati Reds has been awesome. Chris Sale has been awesome for the Braves. Like, there are a lot of really good pitchers in the National League right now. And I didn't include Paul Skeens, who is dominant every time he takes the mound, and Shohei Ohtani, whose ERA is like 0.7.
Yeah, he had those 2 starts. He allowed 5 earned runs against the Phillies and then 5 earned on opening day. Like so Skeens, thankfully for that, because I think that the people who make decisions sometimes they only notice the highs and lows, like the really highs and the really lows.
Right.
So I think that's why Sanchez will finally get to start an All-Star game, let alone make the All-Star game. You know, it's like if there's not something notable that gets your attention. And I think that this case, Skeens, they'll remember that blow up on opening day and this blow up against the Phillies.
And the last thing with Sanchez, I was just looking at the game log between. I excluded the last few outs of that Giants start where the streak began, but from 5-5 to 6-3, 8 innings, 7 innings, complete game, 8 innings, 7 innings, 7 innings. Strikeout totals 10, 7, 13, 6, 9, 8. And in no game in that stretch did he give up more than 6 hits. And in no game in that stretch did he walk more than 2. I mean, you talk about it's like a 1-1 whip in that time for in his season. And, it's sub 1 whip basically in that stretch. And then the last thing too, back-to-back starts against the same team. And I know the Padres are struggling, right? Offensively, they are at this juncture one of the teams that are behind the Phillies in a lot of offensive categories. But to face the same team twice in 6 days, that's a tough challenge. And Cristopher Sanchez, 14 innings, 1 earned run, 17 strikeouts, 10 hits.
Yeah. And look, I know Manny Machado hasn't had a really good year, but he's still one of the better right-handed hitters in Major League Baseball right now. Fernando Tatis Jr., his powers seem to fall off a little bit this year. He only has the 1 home run, but still, he's somebody that you see as one of the better right-handed hitters in the game. So, especially after seeing him last week, you would think that they would be candidates to do something against them, and he was able to keep them at bay for the most part.
Yeah, and obviously they've got some other guys too. Like, obviously Gavin Sheets is not going to play against him being a left-handed hitter, but Sheets is a problem against right-handed pitching. They have who is it? Their center fielder, and I'm blanking on his name. Jackson Merrill is having a really rough season. Was the rookie of the year just a couple of years ago. Obviously Jake Cronenworth has not performed. The whole team has not performed the way that you expect them to. And when you name all those names, it's why, as you said in the beginning of the show, it's a good team that's not playing like a good team. And I would expect at some point for them to bounce back. But to do it twice in the span of 6 days is really, really impressive.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I mean, it's just, for a while they were leading the Dodgers in the West. So I mean, I expect them to go on another streak as well and kind of ramp things up. But hey, you know what? I mean, this is the Phillies. Phillies threw some of their best at them in Sanchez. I mean, the Duran's lights out at the moment. So
incredible.
I mean, when you have those 2 elements in 2 different series, and you kind of feel good about that.
So let's kind of shift to a wider scope. Because I said at the beginning of the show, 30 games. It's been 30 games since the beginning of May. So May 1st through last night, the Phillies have played 30 games. They are 20-10 in those 30 games. Do you know how many teams have a better record than the Phillies since May 1st in terms of winning percentage?
That's a tough one. The Phillies have gained a game on the Braves, and that's just one. So I don't think it's the Braves.
No, so the Braves won last night, I believe. So they are now 20-10 as well.
Oh,
so they have the same record as the Phillies. So as well as the Phillies have played winning wise, the Braves just continue to win.
catch any games against the Braves. Okay, so
the answer is 1. The Milwaukee Brewers are the only team with a better winning percentage record over that time at 21-8. The Braves are 20-10. The Dodgers and the Guardians are 20-11. The Rays have played some good baseball. They're just behind that as well. We have done a lot of, and rightfully so, we have done a lot of complaining about how the Phillies have lacked offensive productivity specific from the right-handed side of the plate. In turn, we've also really praised how good the pitching, especially the starting pitching, has been. So I'm going to ask you probably a simple question with a much more complex answer. 20-10, the good is very known, the bad is very known. is it sustainable? Maybe not at 67%, but is it sustainable success the way that the model is currently constructed?
It depends how you define the word success. You're right. This is a longer answer, right? If success is winning enough games to make the playoffs, I think then yeah, they can do that. But I think this is a team that aspires for much, much more than that. So I think they need to fix some of this roster, however they can along the way. There are definitely some wasted spots on the offensive side here, and they absolutely need to make some adjustments. So I think this is going to be. I think are they good enough to get to the playoffs right now? Yes, but I
Sure.
think they need to make some real real adjustments on this roster if they're going to actually do something once they get to the playoffs. They need more offense than this because they're gonna face some of that best pitching once you get to the playoffs, and you need to be able to eke out some runs against them.
So I'm just going to give you some of the numbers for the pitching staff since May 1st. A 3.11 team ERA. That is third best in baseball. They are in the top five in strikeouts, opponent on base percentage, strikeouts per nine, walks per nine, whip, percentage of runners left on base, stranded runners, and they are first in the league in generating soft contact, and they're eighth in opponent slugging percentage. So they're top 10 in every single one of those categories that I just provided for you. It's no surprise that the Phillies are winning games despite not scoring a lot of runs because you've seen it. Like they've now have had 13 of their last 14 games. They have scored less than four or less runs. Last night they win scoring 3. They've won many games in the past month scoring 3. They've won a couple games scoring 2. They've won a couple games winning 1-0. So and in fact, like they lost a game to Cleveland earlier in the month of May, 1-0.
Sanchez start.
Right. The one non-win from Sanchez in that run. The pitching, I mean, like as you said, is it sustainable for a regular season run? For sure, because much like it's been over the last couple of years, we go into a series and go, there's a really good chance the Phillies rotation is better than your rotation. And that gives you a leg up on most teams other than the teams that are just going to outslug you, over a 3-game set. But if you go into a series and say, hey, Cleveland's rotation has been really, really good, just as good, but you're not playing Cleveland again for the foreseeable future. Atlanta's rotation has been really good, but you don't play them until, September now, I believe. Like most of the teams that you're going to play, you are at least on equal footing, and there's a really good chance your rotation is better heading into a 3 or 4 game series.
Yeah, I'm with you there, but you know what? I think they need to think like other teams have. Like the last few years, a lot of teams were building their roster at the trade deadline as if they were going to face the Phillies in the playoffs. And so I think they need to start thinking that way. How are they going to match up with the Atlanta Braves? How are they going to match up with the Milwaukee Brewers? How are they going to match up with the Los Angeles Dodgers, right? I think if I had to guess now, I think those are the 4 playoff teams.
Sure.
4 of the playoff teams, right? There's 90 wild cards now, of course, but in terms of the ones that are going to make it, I think Braves, Dodgers, Brewers are going to coast to their respective divisions. So how are you going to face those 3 teams? I think is something that they have to be very intentional about. In the same way, the other teams last couple of years have been like, all right, what lefties can we add to this bullpen that can specifically target Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper? And that's how they beat the Phillies.
Yeah, and if you're not getting a lefty, you're getting, you're trying to get Tyler Rogers, the submarine right-hander who has great numbers against the Phillies. But you're right, because if you get into a 5-game series or a wild card even, now I think the Dodgers probably find a way to get the bye. But if you get into a wild card series against the Dodgers, you're going to feel really good about sending Zach Wheeler and Cristopher Sanchez to the mound. But the Dodgers, in turn, are going to feel really good about sending Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Shohei Ohtani to the mound. I mean, it's going to be a rock fight. First to 3 probably wins that game.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And a lot of times when you're playing, if you're not going to win your division, you're not able to set up your rotation for the playoffs either.
Right.
So that's another thing the Phillies need to think about.
Yeah, right. And that's something that, you don't really give pause to. You go, okay, well, you're going Wheeler, Sanchez 1-2 or Sanchez Wheeler 1-2. If it works out that way, that's great. But if you got to win game 161 and game 162 to make the postseason, you might have to start Sanchez on short rest. And then game 1 now goes to Jesus Luzardo, which is not a bad option. I trust Jesus Luzardo, but if I had my druthers, I'd much prefer Cristopher Sanchez and Zach Wheeler to start. But then you're talking about, does Andrew Painter start game 2? Does Aaron Nola start game 2? Are you piecing it together? So I didn't even think about that aspect of it. Is you're right. If you're battling for 162 games, which you've had the luxury of not having to do the last few years, it changes the dynamic of things.
Yeah, that 10-game losing streak made a huge difference. And by the way, the Cubs had one of their own, and the Phillies have now gotten ahead of the Cubs in the standings.
The Cubs are 5-18 in their last 23 games.
But who would have thought? I mean, when the Phillies played the Cubs were on top of the world, and Phillies are now ahead of them in the standings, which is unbelievable. Cubs are a game out of the wild card. Phillies are half a game out of the wild card right now.
So the inverse of this, and it's, as you said, kind of having to think about setting this up for the future run. And we've talked about the righties ad nauseum. We're not going to do it again, but specifically just offensively as a whole, as I gave you all those numbers that they're in the top 10 in pitching wise, here's all the numbers they're in the bottom 10 in offensively: 27th in average, 26th in runs, 29th in on base, 22nd in OPS. They are 29th with hits with runners in scoring position. And that's in that May 1st to June 3rd pocket. They have 43 hits in a 33-day sample size with runners in scoring position. There's only one team that has fewer hits in that stretch. So as good as the pitching has been, that's why I asked you, is the model sustainable when you are forced to basically win 3-2, 2-1, 3-1 type of games on what seems to be a nightly basis?
Yeah, and I'm not a fan of Kyle Schwarber in the leadoff spot. I mean, if they want to make all those homers solo homers instead of actually adding some extra runs by getting somebody on base in front of him, I guess they're doing what they should. But this is I'm not a fan, and so I don't think that helps their run production right now. So,
well, and I think that's Trey Turner's fault. You know what I mean?
It is.
If Trey Turner were succeeding, maybe not to the level of National League batting title 2025 Trey Turner, but if he were not hitting low 230s, even if he's in the 260s or 270s, this probably isn't a conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta think that the reigning batting champion in the National League will get it together at some point.
You hope.
Yeah, especially with the rest of the lot. After you get to number 4 in the lineup, it's a wasteland anyway. So, I mean, look at that lineup, and the OPSs starting with number 5 is just.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Well, and that you bring up the OPS, right? No surprise Schwarber and Harper are 1 and 2. They should be. That's where those two guys should be, at 1 and 2. Brandon Marsh, who's had a heck of a year, I believe is still number 3 by a pretty sizable margin. And the last time I checked, I think number 4 might be Bryson Stott at this point.
Yeah, and it's not looking good either.
Right. So. And then, you're talking about a huge drop-off between Marsh and Stott. And then the other part of that, again, we're not going to have to dive too deep into it. Lefty, 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 lefty.
Yep. Yeah.
It becomes the same conversation every single week, but that's kind of the reality of what this team is currently facing.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to put the 3 lefties in a row that are your top 3 because the opponents will just throw a tough lefty in the bullpen, out of the bullpen, and then neutralize them for the last 2 innings of the game. So it puts them in a really, really tough spot.
So the next thing, kind of, maybe to balance this out a little bit, play, good, bad, good, bad. There are 3 games over 500 now for the first time this season. Their run differential at this juncture is -24, which is better than it was, but it is -24. I'm going to give you some of the other teams kind of in that pocket, and I'll give you their run differentials. The Arizona Cardinals geez. The Arizona Cardinals might win 3 games this year. The Arizona Diamondbacks have 32 wins. They are 32-29. Their run differential is 3, +3. Now, I will say this. The Diamondbacks don't have a problem scoring runs. The Diamondbacks for 4 straight years have had a problem surrendering runs. They have 273 runs scored. They have almost 40 more runs scored than the Phillies. They've given up 10 more. The Chicago White Sox, who have been a nice surprise so far to begin the year, are 33-29. Their run differential is +11. They have scored 293 runs this year. They are just out-slugging teams. They're playing bizarro Phillies baseball where they're winning games like 9-8 because they've given up 282 runs. And then the two teams that are at the top of the American League, Cleveland and Tampa Bay, who both have 36 wins, are +7 and +5, respectively. Now, I give you those numbers understanding we could play one of those things is not like the other, and that is the Phillies' payroll is disturbingly higher than the rest of these teams. But it gives you an understanding that teams with good pitching, I guess, can have a sustainable run, even if their run differential margins are thin.
I mean, the Phillies did pick up, I think it was 30 runs on that run differential since May 1st. So you feel a little bit better about that, at least where they are and where they're going. I mean, I know you don't want to totally dismiss the month of April as because that was part of the season, but you feel like at least going forward, the Phillies are in a better spot. I mean, like the Chicago Cubs, I don't think you feel the same way you did
Sure.
as you did when the Phillies faced them. Their run differential is at 17 now, but that was considerably higher. And when you mentioned the Diamondbacks, I think they've been about level the whole way. So I think the one difference is the Phillies at least seem to be poised in a better direction at this point compared to some of these other teams. But I mean, the Phillies lately they're only picking up with these victories, maybe one or two runs positive to that differential when they win, and they do have some losses scattered in there a third of the time, right? So it's not going to quickly raise their number, but I think the Phillies are, at least if you start from May and look ahead, it seems like they've gotten their pitching figured out at least. That was struggling along in April. I
Sure.
feel like that they're in a better spot, and that doesn't tell the whole story for the big picture of the season.
Yeah, and I think if you would have asked, if we would have been truthful about heading into the season, if I gave you those 5 teams and said which one is going to be the best team, I don't think just Phillies fans. I think baseball fans would have told you it's going to be the Phillies. Based on Arizona, probably a 500 team. We thought at the beginning of the year, White Sox better, but still not good. They're well performing out expectations. Cleveland and Tampa Bay, they play that Moneyball style of baseball. They both have put together really good pitching staffs. And for those reasons, plus the fact that they have some, auxiliary young pieces that are playing really well. But I look at the runs scored. That's the big thing to me. Cleveland's given up 4 less runs than the Phillies have. The Phillies have given up less runs than all of those other teams. But in terms of runs scored, the Phillies are at 236. Arizona's 270, White Sox 290, Cleveland 260. And we talk about Cleveland like that's a team that they don't score runs. And they're still 25 plus runs above the Phillies. Tampa Bay 270. So that would be, I guess, the counter to that would be the Phillies pitching has been excellent. They've only allowed 260 runs all season. And that's with a start that, a month and a half ago, you and I were going, hey, I know the offense stinks, but the pitching hasn't been very good either. The pitching has not only leveled, but been awesome. The Phillies have only scored 236 runs this year.
Yeah, this is which you shouldn't score that few when you're spending that much money on a lineup and $30 million in right field. You'd hope to get a little bit more out of that as well. But by the way, I will say though, Garcia, his swing has looked a lot better the last couple of days.
Well, he's certainly, the one thing with him has obviously been hard contact, right? Like, is he going to continue to hit the ball hard? You'd hope at some point that changes the outcome of some of his at bats.
Yeah, his bat speed's been pretty good. So
Yeah.
hopefully he's on the right track.
Last thing that we want to get into today, real quick update. Phillies released a medical update yesterday on their top prospect, Aiden Miller, and you can add this to the list of Philadelphia sports injuries that no one has ever heard of before they've happened. This is the release, and I'm going to read it verbatim just because I don't know what it is. My wife, by the way, is an athletic trainer. I haven't asked her what this is, but I don't even know how to begin to approach what this is. Quote, Phillies infielder Aiden Miller has been diagnosed with discogenic pain and facet inflammation in the lumbar spine. Due to a recurrence of low back pain when returning to baseball activity, he has seen several spine specialists over the last week. The specialists were in agreement that the recommended course of treatment, minimally invasive procedure called radiofrequency ablation of the facet joints. I'm using a lot of words that I don't know what they mean here, Frank. But the point is, his return to activity is listed as 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
I don't know what half those words mean, but they don't sound good.
So disco, it's not about the dance; it's about discs in the back. And I know anybody know that's had back pain, it's like no joke, right? So this is when there is pain by by result of damaged intervertebral discs. So some of the discs in the back are damaged and therefore sends a lot of pain signals. Now, I know the word ablation because maybe you know somebody who's had one of the heart. You know that's what they do when they sort of zap. So the word ablation, the root there is blaze, like fire.
Sure.
What they're literally going to do is they're going to go in and burn some of those sensors that where he feels the pain so that he can play through the pain. That seems what's going to be
Wow.
what's going to be happening here. So when they say ablation, that's what that is. So maybe you know
I,
someone who got it
I
in the
know
heart.
I know that it's a serious matter, but like the only thing I can think about is that seems very like Wolverine.
Yeah, I feel like that the fact that doing an ablation is about pain tolerance. So it's
Sure.
not correcting those discs in the back. So definitely I think that means that's something to really really look at. I mean, sometimes people have a degenerative back disc disease of some sort, so it makes me this is my non-medical opinion, but it sounds like this is about treating the pain more than
Yeah.
solving the issue. So I think that is a little nerve-wracking. So I mean, obviously you want to get them on the field, but if they can take care of the pain, that's one thing. But is there
Sure.
going to be long-term, consequences here that
Sure.
really we should keep an eye on?
Yeah, I think that if it sucks because this is a guy that the Phillies have very highly touted. I think a lot of us have really highly touted. The skill is certainly there, and something like this happens, and immediately people go, "See, this is why you should always trade your prospects." And it's like, listen, I agree with that sentiment, but there was like 3 or 4 prospects the Phillies had last year that I was pretty vehemently against trading, and Andrew Miller, excuse me, uh, Aiden Miller and Andrew Painter were 2 of them. The other was Eduardo Tait, who they obviously traded for Joan Duran, which looks to be a pretty darn good move so far. But you have a couple of guys that you feel comfortable with, and you would like to see them progress and become homegrown type of players, especially considering the Phillies have not had a very significant track record of
Hmm.
homegrown players. This guy felt like one that was going to be an everyday major league player. That doesn't mean that he can't eventually be that guy, but the setbacks do become worrisome, especially as you just laid out, if it becomes pain management and not fixing a situation.
Yeah, and to last year I was actually okay with them trading a Miller or Painter, but I wanted to see. I feel like I spent a ton of time on the air last year around the trade deadline. The Phillies had never got the bat that I thought they needed to get at the trade deadline. I was willing to make those trades if they got a longer term piece,
Sure.
not someone you plug in till the end of the year. So I mean, I think it's about the right trade more so than you can't trade your top prospects ever. That's for me personally. We've seen the San Diego Padres, by the way, they've done it a ton over the years. They traded Trey Turner when Trey Turner was a hot prospect, and it
Sure.
didn't seem to completely screw up their future because they made other deals. So
They traded Leo
um,
DeVries this past season.
yeah, yeah. So they're not afraid to do it, but I think I'm one of the old adage from Casey Stern, if you remember the baseball broadcaster, prospects are cool, parades are cooler. So I would have been
Sure.
open minded to such a thing, but I don't think that I think you're mentioning the other extreme where you have to trade the prospects because you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
Well, yeah, some of them are going to work out in Major League Baseball, but yeah, some won't, and sometimes a prospect nets you an average run of the mill starting player, and that's still a success.
Well,
So
and the reason I bring it up is not to be like, you know, confrontational or to be, the polarizing or whatever, but you see it on Twitter, you see it on social media as soon as the injury news
yeah,
happens. It's like, oh well, yeah, they should have traded him. And it's like, well, how can you foresee this to have happened?
yeah, and we've seen the Phillies trade a number of prospects over the years. Sixto Sanchez never really became anything. Yeah, you have those, but then sometimes like Zach Wheeler gets traded by the Giants. I mean
Sure.
you never really know. That's why they're prospects, but you need to in Major League Baseball not just. I mean, the Phillies had to essentially spend themselves out of the misery that was the rebuild of the late 2010s. And so when you're spending yourself out of that just by buying free agents, you need some players to fill out your roster that are
Sure.
homegrown. So I mean, you need to remember that as well. You just
Which I
can't
will
have
say,
everybody from the
as to
outside.
the current roster, it is nice to see that Brandon Marsh is not just performing, but overperforming because he still is on a relatively team friendly deal.
Yeah, yeah, and he's someone that was acquired in a trade. So I mean, it's he was a top prospect at one point for the Los Angeles Angels of
Sure.
Anaheim, whatever they're called this week. I never say it right. But yeah, I mean, but plus two, like you want to develop the prospects that can net you players like that. So so the Phillies have been I don't want to say very conservative. They have been conservative, I think, since the late 2010s rebuild. Just because they need some homegrown players. So, but again, the Brandon Marsh type trades, if you can make some of those and hit on them, find somebody's spare parts that can still be productive. I think that's a key to this too. So,
Well,
I
and,
mean,
and
I don't know.
sometimes you acquire a starting pitcher who wasn't going to make another team's 40, and he goes on to have the fifth best scoreless streak in the history of
Yeah,
baseball.
exactly. So, I mean, there's no exact science to this, but I saw someone, I think it was David Esser, who's written for a number of publications over the years, just talk about how the Phillies need to start making some 2021 Braves type trades. If you remember the Braves in 2021, they just picked up a few pieces here or there, and nothing flashy. In fact, you might not remember their names completely at this point, but they were able to supplement the roster just enough with marginal players that happened to be available, and it made all the difference. And I'm willing to see the Phillies at least roll the dice on some players that are cut from other teams right now, just to change up the mix, and especially since they have roster spots which tend to be available. But you're talking about a Braves team, the Eddie Rosarios of the
Rosario,
world, and
yeah.
the who else did they add that year? I'm trying to Jorge Soler. Like those were not flashy names, but got them over the hump. I mean, Phillies should be hunting for that kind of stuff right now.
Well, you bring up cut players, and we don't have time to dive into this, but yesterday the San Diego Padres DFA'd Nick Castellanos while they were in Philadelphia, by the way. So now the Phillies are paying $30 million for one guy who's not on the team and one guy who's hitting sub 200. The guy who's not on the team is not on a team now. I will say a little bit of an unfortunate way to be DFA'd in the town that kind of said, be gone. And then you get a little video tribute the night before and then DFA'd the following day. But a very Nick Castellanos way to get DFA'd, where it was like, well, I don't like my playing time. And they go, well, you're not playing very well.
I kind of wondered if he would be the one to hit a home run off Chris Sanchez, because if he was still in the roster, he would have started that day.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, if he's gonna, I mean, wasn't able to verify that he was complaining about playing time there. But I mean, come on, dude.
But that'll pretty much wrap up to today's festivities. Good conversation today, as always. If you're listening on any of our audio-only platforms, if you wouldn't mind, just drop a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate it. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button and smash the subscribe button as well. We'll be back next week for another edition of the Run It Back podcast as the Phillies wrap up the series today against the Padres and then head into a weekend series followed by the next series, which they have off on Monday, so it'll begin on Tuesday. So we'll be back next week to chat about all of it right here on the Run It Back podcast. So for my partner, Frank Close, I'm Tyler Zulli saying thank you so much for hanging out with us. We'll talk to you next week right here on the Run It Back podcast. See you.